Hello everyone and welcome to a brand new episode of the Sports Insight with your host Alamdar Khan. And yes, as you know, we give you sports information from all across the globe. You guys can surely reach out to us on our social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That basically works both for Twitter and for Instagram. But anyways, we'll go to the headlines first. And yes, finally PSL is coming to a conclusive side. Yes, after weeks of uncertainties, PSL 6 is up and ready in Abu Dhabi, and we're so looking forward for the first clash, which is Islamabad United versus Lahore Qalandars. And yes, in terms of ECB, they're actually looking forward to take appropriate action over England's player historical tweets, and as they recently started emerging in terms of racism. And yes, from the world of NBA, Utah Jazz managed to defeat the Clippers 112-109. And not to forget that, 76ers won against the Hawks 118-102. From the world of French Open, Stefanos Tsitsipas and Alexander Zverev actually managed to book their places in the semi-final. Yes, those were the headlines, and surely we're talking about finally PSL is now all set and ready in terms of happening in Abu Dhabi. But the point is, there were so many question marks back then, how it all started. And there were so many issues. Why? Because of the coronavirus pandemic. And not to forget, this coronavirus pandemic has been something associated to almost all kind of sports. But anyways, to discuss more in-depth analysis, you have a big name in terms of cricket. Yes, we have Sikandar Bakht with us, who has a big vision in terms of cricket. Sikandar, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So first things first, I would surely want to take you back to the time when, when it all started, when we all started watching PSL, enjoying PSL, even though during these hard times of Corona, and people in Pakistan were loving the entire energy. Slowly and gradually, it came up to a point that, it had to come to a halt after the, 17th, in fact, the 14th match. And where did we go wrong back then? And now, finally, during these hard times of summer, we finally have come up to a point of concluding and starting off with the journey where we left it. So what's your take on that back then in March?
I guess back in March, we all were getting educated as to what Corona can do and what kind of damages Corona has caused around the world. And I think a human being is smart. They've learned a lot of things through the virus itself.
Right.
And we've learned from our mistakes that what are the exact do's and don'ts. And having said that, you can't have anything that's watertight. There'll always be spaces, but what you try to do as an individual and as a collective effort that try to make it as strong as possible in terms of bubble, in terms of not allowing the virus to disrupt anything that you planned. But having said that, it's upon an individual how they actually handle it. Collectively, then only you can succeed. What happened back in 2020, of course, there were a few loopholes, and what has happened now is that we have corrected those mistakes and we've tried not to repeat them. That is why I say what I said when I started off this conversation, that we have, not just we, around the world, we've learned through the virus and through our mistakes what needs to be done in order to successfully complete anything that you're looking to do.
Right. But in terms of individuality, if we start with that, because obviously there was a big happiness and big smiles on the faces of those who were actually following PSL to begin with. And, definitely in terms of what we actually went through back in 2020 and then coming up to, the current situation from March to now, the amount of changes, the amount of strictness, the amount of, keeping our team members, keeping our officials, keep our people back in the bubble. I'll start with that. What has PCB finally concluded and made in this current situation of learning from back then lessons to where they are right now?
Well, they have imposed certain rules and regulations of their own, and there are regulations of another country where you're doing the PSL now, which is the UAE. Abu Dhabi has their own set rules. So what the PCB has done to start off with, we've had a 7-day isolation period for all of us in our rooms. And then followed by when the bubble begins after those 7 days. And in that also, you have limited access to things in terms of where you can be in a hotel. and we can't be in each other's rooms as well. So we have a common area where we have our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So basically, we're still in quarantine. It's day 14, if you really ask me, here in the UAE. I was just mentioning this morning that players have gone for practice, the crew have gone to set up. It's only the commentators who've been in the hotel for 14 days now.
Right.
And hopefully we'll be getting out today. Yes, they've been extra careful. The board, and of course with the help of the local government rules, they have been extra careful not to be lenient or complacent in anything that shouldn't be overlooked. And I think they've done a good job. We now, I've been reading, I've been listening to channels on social media. People are talking about weather. People are talking about quarantine periods, tickets, visas. See, these are very unusual times, and I guess now we should stop these tantrums and we should put everything aside, and starting the PSL second leg today, we should try in our best of abilities to make this event successful and complete it without any problems.
Absolutely, Sikandar. But I would definitely vote, and I'm sure all the viewers out there, as I said that PSL actually brings smiles to our face, anyways. But in terms of hosting such events, even if we look into, if we quickly make a jump to IPL, if we talk about IPL, obviously they tried their level best, but obviously the situation in India is very, very critical. There's still question marks in terms of looking into where can be the next option in terms of hosting the World Cup T20. So the point is, I understand, and we all understand, but the point is, my idea entirely would definitely be now that looking forward for a happy PSL. But now that we're doing it in Abu Dhabi, the temperatures, the situations, the scenarios, how it's going to be impactful to our players out there, and I'm sure that PCB would have actually managed, because I was going through a few news in terms of how they would be taking care of the teams. But in terms of overall perspective, not only the security of the players, but obviously everybody out there, in terms of that, if we look into how much do you think would be, because keep playing those matches and then looking forward for the plan of visiting the UK is going to be a big deal for Pakistan cricket team.
Well, see, you mentioned the IPL. IPL, of course, I don't know. You can only actually sit here and say what could have been or would have been. I think the formula of one venue, one hotel is what everyone follows. And during the IPL, there was a lot of traveling, and that probably created the opportunity for the virus to disrupt the event. But that you can only speculate. Here, yes, the weather will play a role. Now, we cannot lie, we cannot hide from it that yes, this is the time of the year where no cricket takes place in the UAE. That's for sure. We are pushing it because there are no windows available. If you don't do it now, you can't do it. It's not about venues. It's about player availabilities, international fixtures for your own team, and the fixtures for the international players that take part in the PSL.
Right.
Which is why the Pakistan Cricket Board, with the help of the Abu Dhabi Cricket, they've tried to stage the matches as late as possible. So you'll have the single headers at 9 o'clock in the night Pakistan time, and you'll have the double headers starting at 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock Pakistan time.
Right.
So trying to avoid the sunlight as much as possible. That's one. There will be a dew factor. There's always been a dew factor this time of the year, and UAE, of course, is not a country that's known for cold weather. It's known for weather which is either pleasant during winters or in summers it's scorching hot. There will be issues with dew, but technology today has helped us to try and avoid as much as you can with those sprays and with all those things. See, once you've jumped into it, you know it, the pros and cons of it. So now you've got to manage it.
Right.
And yes, they probably will not see that kind of intensity. You might not see that many high-scoring games because the wickets are different over here. Right. So those things will come into play, yes. But you've got to manage it. Players as professionals, and all of us, the crew, who will be standing out in professionals, that it is what it is. So you've got to handle that. Yes, if you give a choice to anybody and say, where would you like to play? You probably like to go to a cooler place, but then where? So that's the big question mark.
Right. Sikandar, I would want to, get your insight. Obviously, the in-depth situation scenario, what exactly and how exactly is it panning out. I would also want to hear more about, because there were a lot of speculations in terms of, the Indian officials in Abu Dhabi, and PCB were really trying to get in terms with the government back there, and it came up to a point that it was informed to everybody that the Indian officials who are there in terms of representing the entire matches of the PSL were asked to leave to a different venue, and then there was a talking term situation of PCB with the government that they wanted to move it to Sharjah. So what exactly was the Indepth situation back then?
See, I've been in this hotel on day 14,
Right.
and I cannot even go to my colleague's room, so I'm as good as speculating
Right.
from what has happened. I think you're talking about the Indian crew,
Right.
the broadcast crew, I suppose. See, there are certain red list countries for the UAE, which includes South Africa, India. On the 12th of May, they announced Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka also in it.
Right.
And then the permission was taken that they will come in and they will have to do an extra bit of quarantine. They'll have to do 10 days compared to us doing 7 days. There were, I only hear there were some landing issues, the charter flights coming into Abu Dhabi, so they landed in another emirate. Now, this is UAE, with different emirates have different rules,
Right.
set rules for everything.
Right.
So I suppose what the scenario was that the guys were asked to do their quarantine or finish their quarantine where they've landed, and then enter Abu Dhabi. That is why they were just requested to go there. So they're still coming to the Abu Dhabi stadium, mind you.
Right.
They're coming here to do the setup, and then they go back and go and finish their quarantine at the hotel. When they come to the stadiums, they're in the bubble. They don't get out. Nobody else meets them. And once the event starts, which is today, we'll all be together because we're all part of that same bubble. So yes, things have panned out in a way that there has been a lot of firefighting, trying to sort things because the time is so less. You've got to finish everything within that time span. You mentioned yourself that the England tour is lined up, and thankfully ECB helped Pakistan out by pushing the travel to a couple of days forward. And that allowed Pakistan that small window that they can finish off the final on the 24th.
Right. I hope things go as per plan. We surely want the PSL to conclude in a very beautiful way because we really want this to happen. And I think it was left in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, I would just want to add more in-depth situation and a story that have actually emerged recently in terms of the English cricket actually, taking an appropriate action of the England players in terms of their historical tweets, which have recently started to emerge. Would you like to shed more light on that side as well?
You're talking about Ollie Robinson, I think. I'm not sure of the name because I've just been following it on social media. Is that right?
Yes. I would begin with definitely that, yes.
And 7 wickets on debut. I think, if I'm not wrong, 41 runs. See, he tweeted something back in 2012 or 14, and probably when he was in his teenage. And that's why social media is such a trigger-happy place. You post something, and then it cannot come back.
Right.
Even if you delete it, somebody's taken a screenshot, and that's it. Maybe at that time he wasn't a known name, but then once you join your national side and you're doing your debut, somebody posts it and everything comes up. It's a zero tolerance, absolutely zero tolerance for racism or any personal remarks for any belief or ethnic minority or majorities, anything. Yes, this shows the strong stance of a particular board or a country which says we will not tolerate any sort of racism. So to bring it up and to deal with it, yes, it shows that, this is the way you want to handle things and good. If you want to look at it on the flip side of it, you'd probably say that, he back in that day, 10 years ago, was a kid, and I'm sure that he's a different individual now.
True.
Those beliefs were more childish, or I wouldn't say beliefs were childish, but posting such things were childish. I really don't know what state of mind he was in back then.
Absolutely.
But then he apologized in front of everyone. I think the board also took it to notice. I guess somebody from the England political arena, or I don't know if it's the Prime Minister, I'm really not sure.
Right.
I think put up a question, and now he's been asked to hold on to his cricket till this matter is further investigated by a committee. If he has realized his mistake, which he shouldn't have done initially, then I guess you should give him a chance, keeping in mind the age, keeping in mind the offense which was done over a decade ago, and allow him to be a better human being today. And once somebody apologizes, then you've got to see the seriousness of an offense, and then you start believing how he can actually go through a program where he teaches people what not to do. So just allow him to, express himself,
Right.
and take it from there. But what I like is when you have a zero tolerance for anything, then you keep it that way, one set standard for everyone.
True.
And that's what has been done by the board.
Right. Sikandar, what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and once we get back from the break, we would want to go more into the in-depth analysis in terms of the upcoming matches and, the lineups in terms of PSL, which finally is continuing. I'll just take a quick break. So see you guys after the break, and once we're back, we'll surely be talking more about what's really going to happen in terms of the PSL. See you guys after the break. And yes, welcome back from the break. And yes, before the break, we were discussing obviously the PSL. Finally, it's happening. Yes, it was halted back in March, but finally it came up to a conclusive side that finally PCB decided, and it took a lot of measures, a lot of actions to ensure that those coronavirus situations don't occur. They've made everything hard, in terms of the security and all that. But to discuss more of this, obviously we have with us Sikandar Bakht, as he was before the break. So Sikandar, I would want to know more in terms of today is going to be the beginning of something that was left behind back in March. I would want to know more in terms of how do you see the arrangements. Obviously, we've talked about this before the break in terms of that, it's going to be really, really hot for our players, and they've selected the actual time to ensure that, they all are hydrated. But what truly matters for you or me or anybody who's watching the show right now is going to be how well can our players be and how safe can our players be, because we do not want our players to, besides, entertaining and playing for us, getting injured, getting dehydrated, having those hamstring issues, etc., because I think there's a big lineup in terms of them visiting England and then obviously the West Indies.
Yeah, like I said earlier, that there will be sessions where you might feel that the intensity isn't as much from individuals and from teams, because they've got to manage the kind of weather that will be playing against them. Right. And of course, any player who, or for that matter, any player who's, forget about someone going to England or West Indies, they don't want to fall into injuries because they're foreign players as well. It's not just the Pakistan players. So you might not see that much of an intensity. Yes, they are professionals. They'll make sure that they do give their 100% to the franchises who've hired them. But you will, like I said, that sometimes you've got to let common sense prevail. If it's around feels like factor 50 degrees or 48 degrees and the temperature is soaring around 42, 41 in the evening, you've got to make sure that you manage your energy levels well. You've got to save some for the good moments. You've got to rest some and share the load with another player. So I'm pretty sure with the physios, with the trainers, where their role plays a very big in this, and the coaches, they've worked out who is going to be doing what in their individual roles. As a team, they'll collectively try to implement them and fight it out, not just with the opposition, but also with the weather. This is not the first time. Again, I'm reminding you, yes, it might not be June, July, but Pakistan have played in the UAE weather quite a lot.
Right.
Temperatures have been a little different, but if you remember, long back, Pakistan-Australia played a series. It was very hot, and they started an ODI match at 8 o'clock in the evening, which is 9 o'clock in the night, Pakistan time, and we finished around 3, 4 in the morning.
Right.
Only because of the heat. So yes, they will have to do that. The time frame is so small from the 9th to the 24th that you don't get many caps. So you've got to be ready for the next game. So yeah, that has to be done. That's where your professionalism as an athlete will have to come in.
So in terms of the arrangement, as we're talking about, because is obviously going through the in-depth situation in the news that actually stated that coconut water is going to be there, cold collars are going to be there, lighter kits would be there, just to ensure that all the players do not go through that situation or scenarios. Because if we, and individually I was talking about Pakistan cricket team, why? Because we already delayed our tour to England only because to ensure that, this current PSL situation comes to a conclusive side. So obviously would not want any injuries to our players or any other player out there. So I think, in your personal opinion, you think the arrangements are perfect, spot on in terms of that?
Well, I really don't know personally,
right,
as to what we made for hydrating the players, because that's their individual team management's role. And of course, the Pakistan Cricket Board must have made sure that those things are available to them.
Right.
And Abu Dhabi Cricket helping them out. But yes, I mean, coconut water was mentioned because probably it has more electrolytes. There are so many other drinks and things that are available today to these players, which
Right.
hydrates them and immediately goes into your bloodstream and helps you out. And like I said, these players will make sure that everyone understands their strengths and weaknesses, and they know how their body is reacting to a certain situation. So
Right.
they will take care of that, and that is why you have professional physios, you have all these people. You might have guys probably having issues with the cramps or anything because you're losing too much water, but
Right.
that can happen in anything. I think it will be managed, and that's why you call them professionals. They're pros. So they will make sure that they share load with each other within the team and make sure that this completes. As far as the PSL is concerned, see, this is your probably the only biggest product that Pakistan has, and there are several reasons why you want to finish this and do it. There's sponsorship reasons. There's of
Right.
course, if you've got the biggest product, you got to make sure you don't leave it incomplete
Right.
because there are other repercussions that may happen. So yeah, like I said, it is what it is, and now we need to just make sure that everyone enjoys the game. The crew out there, the people watching it on television are watching and saying that, okay, good, at least we're back on track. That's good.
Right. And in terms of obviously talking about the PSL itself, like I said, it brings smiles to our faces when we see them playing out there. And definitely it would motivate us even more, not only us, I guess, in terms of the team itself, because obviously the players want to go out, do that. In terms of the announcement of obviously the teams that have actually been announced for the upcoming tour, do you think this current PSL situation and these current matches would actually impact obviously those who would actually come out more with flying colours for those facing in the England team and the West Indies?
Well, I mean, there's no hard and fast rule. Of course, the teams have been announced probably for the reason that there is a quarantine period, there are visa issues, and making sure that everyone's in place. That's one.
Right.
But there's no hard and fast rule. If somebody comes up with a brilliant performance, who knows? If God forbid we have an injury of a player who's going, then you've got to find a replacement, because these days you travel big with bigger squads.
Right.
You can't be in a country and then call up for a replacement. Replacement doesn't happen. There's quarantine period. There's all those things that happen.
Right.
So yeah, if there is an outstanding performance somewhere, they might include him. But I really don't know what's the hurry, because you got the usual suspects. All those names, big names who expected to do well,
Right.
are already there in those squads. So
Right.
if a youngster comes up with a brilliant performance, he's got, I believe, personal belief, he's got a lot of time to prove himself further. So you don't have to rush it that we got to put him in this series and got to get him there. I was of the opinion that probably that the players might feel that what's there to play for besides wanting your franchise to win? You want your selectors, national selectors, to see your performance as well.
Right.
So if you announce the teams right before the PSL, then it takes away a little bit of charm from the players trying to show off with their talent. But like I said, that these times are pretty different. You've got to prepare yourself much in advance for tours as a board, as a team. So you've got to announce. You've got to put those things. Yeah, maybe if something very outstanding comes, you can probably induct that person into the West Indies squad and send them in later.
Right. Looking forward for that. Thank you so much, Sikandar, for your in-depth analysis in terms of the world of cricket and specifically in terms of PSL. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Great. So obviously we finally know that tonight is going to be the beginning of the PSL that actually was somewhere struck back in March, and obviously because of the coronavirus situation. And I think they have taken enough margins and enough situations to ensure that this doesn't really happen and the biosecure bubble stays intact. And it's going to be Lahore Qalandars versus Islamabad United. And if we talk about the standings, yes, Karachi Kings obviously still on the top, then Peshawar Zalmi comes on the second number, then obviously Islamabad United, then Lahore, then Multan, and then Quetta Gladiators. So looking forward for this. But anyways, now we surely want to jump over to the world of basketball. Yes, as we know, in terms of the NBA, there's so much happening lately. Yes, if we talk about the NBA, Utah Jazz finally defeated the Clippers 112 to 109, and it was the final game, obviously the game one. But I think in terms of the game itself, it was the closest call because of the fact that, if you look at the entire situation, it's 112 to 109 means one of the most closest game that you could ever see would have definitely been this. And in terms of the analysis of the game, Utah Jazz obviously started off the game. They were 18 in the first quarter, and the Los Angeles Clippers were 25 in the first quarter. So this means that, they started off on the slower side. But in terms of even in the first half overall, Utah Jazz was definitely way far behind than the Clippers. But things actually started changing for them. When we look at the changings, yes, it happened in the third quarter when Jazz managed to score 32 points and Clippers managed to score 19 points in the third quarter. And yes, the fourth quarter finally concluded the entire situation that, Utah Jazz had 33 points and, Clippers had 30 points. And not to forget that, if you talk about people who, in terms of Mitchell, obviously Mitchell from Jazz managed to score 45 points. I think it's a big leap of faith for them in terms of jumping from 100, winning from this close margin. And if you look at obviously the situations of the Clippers definitely stand way above. But unfortunately, the situation in terms of this in terms of this match actually led them to lose the match. And I think one of the most close call matches to begin with. And anyways, I'm going to talk about the second game that actually happened, which was the 76ers that actually won against the Hawks. It's also an interesting take for the fact that, in terms of a lot of people out there, a lot of fans out there, a lot of Hawks fan out there. Because if you talk about the first game that took place, which was obviously on Sunday, which was obviously the Hawks winning against the 76ers. And this time, it's the opposite. So it's going to be a big, long run in terms of, how things are. Because the last game that actually happened was 128 to 124, in which the Hawks won. But this time, it's the 76ers who actually came up to the conclusive side of winning. And if we go into the in-depth analysis of the quarters, if we discuss that, we talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. They started off pretty solid in terms of scoring 33 points in the first quarter, and Atlanta Hawks started off scoring only 20 points. I think they were more on the defensive side and less on the offensive side. But in the long run, obviously, enough lead for them to begin with, and 76ers having a 13-point lead at the very start of the first quarter. There they are, scoring 118 points to 102. But yes, there are a few more games coming up your way in terms of the world of NBA, and we'll surely be sharing that with you. Anyways, I'll quickly jump into the world of tennis. Yes, we're going to talk about tennis. There are a lot of happenings recently that have been going through in terms of tennis. Yes, I'm going to talk about Stefanos Tsitsipas, who actually, who is one of the most phenomenal player in terms of, the French Open itself, and Alexander Zverev actually booked into the semi-final places. And not to forget that Tsitsipas is one of the prime person and one of the prime players in terms of performing on clay. So I think it's going to be, he's definitely going to have more edge in terms of the performance side. But let's see how things go by. And not to forget that, they eventually, the 5th and the 6th seed, they will, have their duel in the French Open. But not to forget that Tsitsipas actually won over 6-3, 7-6 and 7-5 over Medvedev. So it's going to be more interesting to see how finally the both, fighters would actually come up to a conclusive side in the semi-final of the French Open. Anyways, guys, this was pretty much it in terms of sports. If you guys want to reach out to us, you can on a social media handle, which is at the rate of Indus News Sports. That's basically both on Twitter and Instagram. Till then, take good care of yourselves, and bye-bye.